Hi guys! First of all, may I wish you all a happy new year and I hope you had a good holiday season. I'm finally back, hopefully, and just in time for Shannen Doherty's podcast to have talked about Charmed, because I thought if she was going to talk about Charmed at all, it would be like later down the line because she has so much to talk about. But no, it was like right out the gate. I think it was like the very second episode. So I'm just like, oh, we're going straight into the deep end. Awesome. So I watched the video and I started writing and recording for a video on it, but I was sick at the time. Part of the reason I've been gone for so long, and my obsession with Elden Ring, it's better now. But if you ever want to take down a boss or something, let me know and we can do that, or just wander around. Why not? But yeah, so I started on recording an early version of this video, but I was sick at the time, and I got through the intro before I had this major coughing fit that just would not stop. I'm like, okay, I clearly cannot do this video at this time, so I'll try again in a few days. Well, I guess it was a bit of a blessing in disguise, actually, because Shannon did a part 2 with Holly talking about Charmed, and that had even more info. I'm like, oh, I would have had to pretty much start over anyway. So, it's a wash there. But yes, here we are. We are finally doing a video on it. I have quite a few thoughts on the podcast, and I don't agree with everything that was said, but we will definitely get into that. Before we do, I just wanted to say that if you haven't seen the podcast, this may not make a ton of sense. You might want to go watch that first and then come back so you have, the whole context. But, if you don't mind and you just kind of want to hear the thoughts on it, then by all means, whichever you choose is fine by me. Thank you for watching at all. So I'm going to try and be as fair as possible. I know that Shannon's dealing with a lot right now, and that I really do wish her the best. I hope she pulls through. Cancer is no joke, and her husband cheating on her for the last 2 years, and just like, I have such a I don't like cheaters. But yeah, suffice it to say, I know she's going through a lot, but she did choose to release this podcast, and in the interest of being fair to the other 3 people involved, Rose, Holly, and Alyssa, I'm not going to let that color my opinion of the podcast. I'm not going to view it through rose-tinted glasses, especially since my first part of why Shannon really left, which reminds me, mental note, change that to part 1 since there's now going to be a part 2. I feel like that was very heavily biased towards Shannon and kind of more critical of Alyssa, because I felt like this whole time Shannon had walked out of the situation with horns, but Alyssa walked out with a halo, and I didn't understand why, because it's like they both had problems with each other. No, so why is one person getting all the blame and the other person getting none? Especially since Rose went on to have her own issues with Alyssa too, so it's like clearly there was more than one problem there. So that's kind of what my video was exploring with the information available at the time. So yeah, this time I think it's important that I just try to be fair on everyone rather than tipping too far one way or the other. So with that in mind, let's get into it. Although, fair warning, this might be a long one, and it will probably be more in podcast format myself for the sake of simplicity, if you will. But yeah. Okay, so starting with the intro to the podcast, Shannon says,
what's really interesting is that I've been an actress for 42 years. And in those 42 years, a lot of people have told my story, and I never have. To grow up reading articles about yourself and to have people writing books about you, claiming things that you did, whether they be true or not, is hard. It's especially the untrue things, obviously, are much harder, because you read them and you wonder, where they even came up with that, or they took a kernel of a truth and exaggerated it and expanded it to sort of benefit themselves.
I used to wonder why Shannon didn't speak publicly when people were clearly trying to make her look bad. I mean, I know I would be pissed if someone lied about me, especially publicly or for profit. But after hearing this and about how people have been doing this sort of thing to her for years and years, I can see how at some point you'd just be like, F it. let them say what they want to say. They're gonna do it anyway. As long as me and mine know the truth, I'm good. And I really respect that. It takes a lot of mental strength to know that people are out there bad mouthing you, and to, manage how that makes you feel and find a way to be happy despite it. So honestly, major kudos to her for that. And so the first part of the interview with Holly, which, by the way, can we talk about the phrasing of that for a moment? It's not an interview. She's not just simply sitting there asking Holly questions and Holly gives answers. It's, they're having a discussion, they're going back and forth, but it's small potatoes compared to what we're going to talk about. So moving on, first they talk about how they became friends, and I honestly thought that was really cool. I mean, you don't usually hear celebrities be this open about their personal lives, for good reason. So it's always very interesting to me to hear about these sorts of things, and it reminds us that celebrities are people, which I think some people sometimes forget. And my favorite story that they told was the one about how Holly would stay over at Shannon's a lot since her first marriage was a bit of a disaster by the sounds of it, and Holly was very handy around the house and would fix things a lot. So when Shannon said,
I distinctly recall looking at her and saying, it's so weird that there's not a lock on my bathroom door. Like, what if I have a guy over and I need to use the restroom? They could just come in. Like, that's not okay.
Holly immediately installed a lock on the door, which was nice, and that's definitely the kind of friend you want. Though, let's be real, no one should be taking an unlocked door as an invitation to come in unless they've been expressly invited, You shouldn't need a lock for someone to know better. Just, ugh. So yeah, they talk about their friendship, and then they move into how they got involved in Charmed, and right off the bat, Shannon kind of got on my nerves when she said,
obviously off of 90210, I was very trepidatious of working with Aaron Spelling again and getting involved because they burned me really badly on 90210. And do we want to talk about everything that happened in the past? Do we want to talk about that you fired me and didn't even have a discussion with me?
Like, this is something we're going to see a lot of in this podcast, but Shannon's lack of personal accountability can be quite frustrating. And while I do get being young and making mistakes and everything, she is a grown woman now, and you would think she'd be able to take some accountability for being problematic on set, because let's be real, she was. Like, there's just way too many instances people can point to and use as examples, and it's like, as much as you try to deny it, Shannon, they were having issues with you, and they were trying to run a show, and if you're making that difficult to do, like, eventually at some point that's gonna bite you in the butt. And I think her firing from 90210 was fair, and Shannon has tried to point fingers, saying that everyone came in late and they did it way more than she did. She was late like maybe a couple of times and all this stuff, and it's just like, then why were you the only one fired, Shannon? Why not Jenny or Jason or Luke or Brian or anyone else? I mean, okay, not Tori, she was clearly safe because she was the daughter of Aaron Spelling, so she clearly wasn't going anywhere. But really, everyone else was apparently just as bad and or way worse, so why is it that you were the one that was fired? Like, this is what I'm talking about. There was clearly something else going on and you just won't say it. But yeah, it really frustrates me that she continues to market her firing from 90102. I'm leaving that in. I have it written down here. 90210. I don't know why I said the numbers out of order. Okay, now I need to get rid of the giggles. Okay. She continues to market her firing from 90210 as undeserved and making it sound like they utterly screwed her over, and can't seem to see that her own behavior may have played a role in it. And that's where my issue comes in. Whatever. I never even watched 90210. I don't even care that much. So back to Charmed. So despite the blood, what is wrong with me? Despite the bad blood between them, Aaron still thought Shannon would be good for Charmed and invited her to audition, and after some coaxing from Holly, who saw the script in the back of Shannon's car and liked what she read, which I personally think shows that Holly she was the one who believed in Charmed from day one. Like, the minute she saw the script, she encouraged Shannon to audition. She was like, well, clearly they think you'd be good for it, and she wanted to audition herself. Like, Holly is the one that it caught her eye. She fought for it and everything. So, Shannon likes to say, as she will multiple times throughout the podcast, that the show was greenlit based on her, but let's be real, she wouldn't have even been there had Holly not led her to it. So yeah, I think Holly is the one who believed in Tron from day one, and I feel like she deserves a little bit more kudos for it. So Holly, congratulations, you saw something special and you recognized it for what it was. I think that is a very unique and a very beautiful quality. But, so where was I? Before I started showing how much I love Holly, yeah, so Shannon met with Aaron, and they both just decided to let the past be the past and tried to move on. And the only bizarre thing I thought in that whole scenario was that he wanted Shannon to audition for Piper and Holly to audition for Phoebe, which... Can anyone actually picture that? I mean, I tried so hard, but Prue is Piper and Piper is Phoebe. Ugh, weird mental picture. Something else I did kind of want to address that kind of irked me a bit is the way that Shannon cannot seem to praise someone without also praising herself, and she also kind of issues backhanded compliments sometimes, like how she said,
and yet there back then, not saying that it's like this now, back then there was something naive about you personally, and very still very trusting regardless of your mistake. You were still very trusting and soft, and someone like you, persevering and proving everybody wrong, which I love. You guys went out of the room and the network looked at me and they said, yeah, she just doesn't have that it factor. And I was like, what are you talking about? I'm like, that charisma, that when you walk in a room, Shannon, everybody takes notice. And I went, whoa, whoa, whoa.
It's like, really? Really, Shannon? I mean, keep in mind that Holly expressed on the podcast that comment about her not having the star power that Shannon does stuck with her for a while. So there's no way her best friend didn't know that, and yet here she sits talking about how much they praised her and how much they didn't want Holly. And it's like, dude, have some respect. Show some consideration for your friend. Do you understand how you're probably making her feel right now? I just thought that was a bit tasteless, and I'll come back to this later because I definitely have a point to tie it into, but it doesn't sound like she's very good at reading the room, and I'm sure that ruffles a lot of feathers. But moving on to another bit I thought was quite interesting that made me really want to do a video, because I'm like, I haven't seen anyone really talk about this, so let's do that. So there was a section in part 1 of the podcast where Holly says,
and she actually called me years later to do another pilot after Charmed, and right. It was a pilot with 6 women
mistresses, right?
Yeah. And I said, are you trying to kill me? And she goes, no, absolutely not. She goes, I think you're the perfect person for this project. And I was like, why? And she goes, because I know you'll deal with all of them really well.
Now, at first I didn't really understand this part. I was just sitting there wondering, why would Holly's reaction to someone offering her a potential part be like, are you trying to kill me? Isn't that weird? And then the whole, I know that you'll deal with all of them really well response seems like a very specific thing to say. You could tell Holly was choosing her words very carefully, and so that led me to doing some research, because Shannon mentioned the show was Mistresses, and it seems to have been the same Mistresses show that Alyssa eventually starred in. So I'm wondering, are you trying to kill me? I know that you'll deal with all of them really well. Is this Holly's way of giving us a hint that maybe Alyssa has her own reputation for being difficult to deal with, and maybe that person wanted Holly there because she knew that Holly had experience working with Alyssa and, kind of making it work. Obviously just speculation, but I really don't think it was an accident that Holly brought it up. So, just saying. They also talked about Lori Rom, who was the original Phoebe, but we always heard that she quit for reasons, and was always, rumored that it was religious reasons. And I do believe I brought that up in my previous video, that I don't understand why she would have even accepted the role when the show was clearly about witchcraft, just to quit due to religious reasons. I mean, I would have thought she would just pass on the part to begin with, but from what Holly and Shannon say,
and we found out later that she was a member of a particular church, and the church didn't like that she was playing a witch on TV, and basically told her she would go to hell.
And that actually makes a lot of sense. It definitely explains why she took the role and then why she ended up quitting due to religious reasons, which I actually think is BS. I'm not trying to crap on anyone's religion. I just think that, I just don't think it should be up to your church to dictate things like that. If you take a role as a witch, I don't see how that's hurting them, It feels like a bit of a control thing. And definitely manipulative. You'll go to hell? Can't you just say, we don't really approve, we're not really comfortable with this, is there any way you'd reconsider? It's no, if you take this role, you'll go to hell. It's wow, that's some arm twisting there. Wow, I just hope Lori's doing well now, and that she went on to be happy and successful in her own right. And as for the character of Phoebe, we obviously know that was given to Alyssa Milano, and obviously the major conflict on the show was between Shannon and Alyssa. So Shannon and Holly start working towards how it got to that point, and they agree that for the most part in season 1 everyone got along because they were still finding their footing, although they didn't agree on everything. I mean, who does? But I didn't really like the way that Shannon talked about things that she personally didn't agree with such disdain, when she says this.
There were obviously things that we didn't necessarily all agree on. I didn't think it was important to move to a studio lot so that we could have a commissary.
Just because you don't agree with it doesn't mean it's a bad idea, Shannon. I'm not exactly sure what a commissary is. I tried looking it up, and if it's just a place where you can get food, whatever. If it's more like a restaurant type thing, then yeah, maybe that's not important to you, but maybe it's just, I don't know. It just kind of seems like a little thing to focus on, in my opinion, and she sounded very disdainful of it, so, kind of don't agree with that. I did, however, relate to what she said here so much.
I take my time placing stuff in my home.
Yes.
And because it's my sanctuary, right? It's where I feel the safest. So if I've spent, months just looking for the right piece, and I then spend hours figuring out exactly where it goes and at what angle, and somebody comes in and moves it, it tweaks my brain a little bit.
Yeah, just so relatable in my opinion. I mean, I love to collect things, but I hate clutter, so I'm very selective about what I collect and where I put it. So once I finally find something I like, I'm very, very specific about where and how it's placed, and if anyone so much as goes near it, I get nervous, and if they touch it, it's just
no touchy.
I don't mean to be that way, but I can't deny that I am,
Yeah, I mean, I think in the beginning with Charmed, for instance, you were much more of a people pleaser, a producer pleaser. You had your thoughts, you had your opinions, but you were far quicker to acquiesce than I was. For the good of the show, it was always about improving and better scripts, or, people actually showing up and doing their job, and not complaining about it.
Now, see, Shannon says things like this a fair bit throughout the podcast, so I'm not going to stop at each one because I would just be beating a dead horse by that point. But it's things like this that you really have to take care when listening to, because something I've learned about people is that people will generally tell a story that puts them in the best possible light. So you have to make allowances and read between the lines a little bit to find where their story kind of doesn't make sense in the way they're conveying it. Like, for example, this is a really long story that I'm condensing down as much as possible. I can always, make a separate video with the full story if anyone's interested. But basically, I had this friend. She was my best friend for like 7 years. Like, we were so close, it was unreal. And we like almost never had any disagreement. Forget an argument. Like, we got along so well. But something I had started to notice is that she was a bit two-faced. And she would do things like, whenever she was upset with someone, instead of talking to them about it and trying to, work it out, she would always take it publicly and post it on social media. And she usually wouldn't mention them by name, but just enough to where that person would know that she's talking about them. And she would get all these comments and stuff like, oh, I'm so sorry you had to deal with that, like no one should be treating you like that and everything. And it's always so one-sided. And I was just, I didn't like it. I did not agree with it at all. And I tried to tell her that. And she was like, I respect your opinion and all, but it's my social media. Please don't tell me what to post. And that's fair. I'm just saying that I was like, first of all, I don't think that's a very nice thing to do. But I also wondered, like, what's going to happen when she gets upset with me? And sure enough, they weren't as bad as the others, but if I upset her or something, there would usually be some sort of dramatic post, and I got tired of it. I mean, that wasn't the only thing. There were definitely other issues in the friendship, but they're not really relevant to the point I'm trying to make. So essentially, I told her I need some space, and we kind of did our own thing for a few months with her kind of, boundary stomping a little bit. And then it just got to a point where, I can't do this anymore. So I was trying to respond to a message she'd sent me in a nice way, and then she pulled yet something else, and I'm just like, you know what? I don't think we should be friends anymore, and here's why. And she responded to that, and to my face, she was all, oh, you're one of the best friends I ever had. I'm sorry that you feel that way. Maybe we can be friends in the future. I never meant to upset you and all this stuff. So nice to me, right? Well, I had told her, I don't think we should be friends anymore, but I'm not going to block you or anything unless I feel like I need to, And she's like, oh no, I'm not going to block you either. Oh, I would never do that. Well, I think it was like less than 2 days later, I was blocked everywhere. And I was like, I'm pretty sure I know why. And since at that time I had art and personal accounts, she had only remembered to block the art ones, not the personal ones. So I logged into the other account, and sure enough, I was right. She was talking crap about me all across social media and completely twisting everything that was being said. Like, how I said I told her why I didn't want to be friends with her anymore, and she was really nice to me about it? Well, on social media, she's like, when someone takes all your insecurities and uses them against you, after a full week of watching her talk crap about me, I'm like, you know what? Have a taste of your own medicine. And she freaked out, but her response was so more that two-faced crap. Like, for example, one of the things she said was that she blocked me so I couldn't talk to her. And it's just like, I like how you leave out the fact that I told you I wasn't going to block you unless I felt the need to, and it was actually you who blocked me first so you could talk crap about me without me knowing. I like how you leave all that out to make yourself look like this huge victim, when actually stuff like this is why I stopped wanting to be your friend in the first place. And I don't know how you don't see that. And it was just this whole thing. But stuff like that makes you realize that it's easy to look at one side of the story and assume you have all the information and this person would never lie. But there are a lot of people out there who will lie by omission or twist events to make themselves sound better. So you have to, when you read or watch something that someone's saying, you have to be mindful that they could be doing that, and you have to make allowances for that. So when Shannon presents herself in this light, like, I didn't do anything wrong, everyone else had the problem, not me, it's like, it's easy to hear that and go, oh yeah, see, she didn't do anything wrong. But you have to be somewhat critical of that statement. It's like, you had issues on 2 different shows, but none of that was your fault. It was just regular behavior, and everyone around you took offense to it, to the point where you were booted off both shows. It's like, that just doesn't add up, so you have to kind of read between the lines there and balance what's being said with what else do you know about the situation? And, we'll definitely get more into that, but I'm just trying to explain my perspective on this. And also, Shannon and Holly present this as caring about the show and loving and fighting for it, and I completely agree with that and see what they're coming from. I mean, they were with the show pretty much since its inception, and so of course the people that believed in it from the beginning and helped bring it to life are going to be all in, especially in situations like I think it's in part 2 where Holly describes the show was pretty much written by a group of men, and older men at that, which I'm not saying anything against. I'm just saying that if you're an older guy, you may not always have the best idea on how younger women would sound. And that's what Holly said. And, I think she's right. I mean, I do think that switching up our lines a little bit or something, I don't think that's a huge thing. I really wish the showrunners had worked with them more on that, instead of just being like, no, you don't know what you're talking about. Go back to your corner and sit there and wait like a good girl. Like, it definitely feels like, that's what happened sometimes. And they mentioned Brad Kern being the worst offender at this, and yeah, Brad Kern. But I will say that it does sound like they were overzealous at times, and there does come a time where you have to use Shannon's word, acquiesce, and understand that maybe sometimes the showrunners really do know more than you.
Yeah, and very dedicated, and I don't know where that came from necessarily, but it was just, a dedication to making it right and making it well. And it's a work ethic that I don't think you can really manufacture.
It is work ethic. And it's work ethic along with being grateful, right?
Right.
I think that we were both always very grateful. Gratefulness does not equate to not having an opinion.
Right.
You can still be grateful and look and say, you know what, this script is not great. Let's do a polish on it. And whenever I would say something that was constructive about trying to improve the show or about my character, they would kind of like go, and then smile and walk away. And then I remember that like my attorney or my agent or my manager would always get a phone call being
Sure.
like, Shannon needs to stay in her lane. And voice really started becoming much more strong in the 3rd season. Like you were gaining it in the 2nd season, but by the 3rd season, I felt like you had your voice and you were willing to use it, for the good of the show. Like it was always about improving and better scripts or, people actually showing up and doing their job and not complaining about it.
Now, see, I find this statement rather hypocritical. So when you and Holly voice your disagreement or displeasure with something, it's for the good of show and you were just being strong and using your voices. But if someone else voiced their discontentment, they were complaining, that is really unfair, and I don't think it should be up to you to decide who had a valid complaint and who didn't. And this is why you have to listen very closely to not only what people say, but how they frame the circumstances. Holly says that she doesn't remember them ever being a pain in the ass.
All of that happened organically. I don't remember ever feeling like we were being a pain in the ass.
To be fair, most pains in the ass don't believe they're being pains in the ass, so yeah, there's that.
I mean, it was very important to me, and I don't know how. I mean, it always was to both of us. It was always very important, and even to Alyssa in the beginning.
Okay, wait a minute. Hold the phone. I mean, obviously Holly and Shannon know Alyssa and the situation way better than any of us, but what exactly qualifies them to be the judges of whether Alyssa cared about the show or not, and or when she apparently stopped caring? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but was she not just as much of a producer on Charmed as Holly was from season 4 onward? I mean, I'm not in showbiz, but from what I understand about producing, they do have a hand in on the show, right? Why would she do that if she just straight up didn't care? I don't like this at all. I feel like I can see why Alyssa would have seen the situation as Shannon and Holly versus her, considering they seem to have this, well, we care and you don't mentality. And we'll come back to that later because there's a much better point to press this on, but just note that.
And, there wasn't, women writers on set aside from Connie. And, eventually we saw how that went too. She was pushed out creatively, financially, and in all the ways of the show that she created based on her own sisters by the group of guys.
And see, that is so wrong. Like, Constance did so much for the show. It sounds like it was pretty much her idea, and yet she got screwed out of it. And, I mean, I know showbiz is cutthroat, but that just shouldn't be allowed. Like, I don't see how that was ever able to happen. It's like the same, I'm having the same feeling I did when I found out that most artists don't actually own their masters. It's like, what? How can you write, create, produce something that you came up with and someone else owns that and can push you out if they want? Like, I don't understand how that was ever a thing, and I think studios have way too much control in that regard. Seriously, whoever was responsible for that owes her a big effing apology, and honestly should not be allowed to work in showbiz anymore, because, if you'll do that to one, why wouldn't you do that to someone else? It's like, I wouldn't want to work with someone like that. I mean, don't get me wrong, I know Hollywood's full of them. It's known for it. But still, I feel so bad for Constance. I wish there was something, some sort of olive branch we could extend to her to let her know that we understand that she was brilliant and she did so much and she brought us a show that we all loved, and we recognize her part in that, even though her part got severely diminished and pushed out in the end by people who ended up taking the show and making it into something similar but ultimately kind of unrecognizable when you compare it to the beginning. But yeah. And then Holly goes on to say that,
and also the problem is that Brad did a polish on every script. So it didn't matter if we had like a great script from Daniel or Zach and Chris. It came out feeling and sounding the same because Brad did a polish on every script. And I was like, how many times am I going to say we're screwed? Every time there was a we're screwed, it was Brad Kern.
And oh, why am I not surprised? Flippin' Brad Kern. I would bet dollars to donuts that he had a major stake in getting Connie out of the way, because she was probably the person who had the most power besides him in the writing room. And it's just like, well, I don't like it when she tells me no. It's like, wow, I guess you'll learn how to deal with it. If he never works in showbiz again, I won't shed a tear. Like, I wish that someone had copies of the way scripts looked before Brad touched them, and they could publish them so we could see what the original vision for the episode was. I feel like that would be a lot, I feel like that would be very cathartic for all involved. And maybe, wink wink, if Shannon, Holly, Alyssa, and Rose could ever get along for 5 minutes, they could maybe reenact the scenes a little bit. I mean, it doesn't have to be professionally done. It could just be like a webcam thing. Us Charmed fans will take anything. They could even write, oh my god, that would be so great if they wrote their own scene of Paige finally getting to meet Prue. I mean, I know technically CBS owns the intellectual property. I've seen that a lot in my YouTube studio. So I definitely understand that they can make it difficult, but us fans, we would eat that up. Please. Especially if they could get like Constance involved and, just kind of collaborate that. I feel like that would be really, really cool to see. Especially since I like creatively the way Shannon's mind works, because I haven't gotten there yet. I think it's in part 2, but Shannon says that she directed the final episode she was in without knowing that that would be her death, although I don't know if that was purposeful. I heard that they were hoping the girls could work it out, or they could find some way to bring everyone back, and then that's why it was a cliffhanger, but turns out, they were kind of forced to choose, and so it ended up being her death scene. So I don't think that was an intentional way to screw with her. But point is, she said that she directed her own death scene without knowing it, and if she had known, she would have directed, like, it would have been a lot more epic. And one of the things she suggested was, like, that Prue got possessed or taken over, and, Piper ended up having no choice but to use her power and blow her up. And Piper had to live the next season knowing that she killed her sister. She had no choice, but, ultimately, like, how do you live with that? And I'm like, dude, that would have been crazy to see. Like, could you imagine season 4 Piper if she was forced to kill Prue in season 3? Like, oh my god, that would have been just epic. Let's be real, epic. And I have to admit, I would have originally thought that there's no way Holly could kind of go there to that dark place. But after seeing episodes like The Wendigo and Hell Hath No Fury and Centennial Charmed, it's just like, you know what? I actually think she could. So, what a missed opportunity. Like, I don't want Piper to have killed Prue, but, like, you have to admit, that would be some amazing television. Being forced to kill someone you love, and then you have to live with the consequences of that. Honestly, I don't think I could do it. I look at my sister, and I'm just like, unless she was literally trying to kill me, I just can't envision a scenario where I could ever, do that, so as a sister, I feel like that would really hit home in a way. And I think with a lot of viewers, because I'm sure that a lot of viewers have siblings, so it's just like, looking over at your sibling, like, I don't know if I could ever do that. But I just, oh my god, I love speculation. We should just make like a speculation video, but I've focused on this part way too long. I have half an hour at best before I need to leave, so I need to move on. So back to Connie getting pushed out and Brad Kern doing a polish on the script, and like the aftermath. I was on Shannon and Holly's side for a while here, and was definitely agreeing. I don't think what happened to Connie was right. I think Brad Kern is full of stuff. Let's say stuff. But the way Shannon said this,
Yeah. I have such a fascinating letter from him that at some point I'm going to read on this podcast. It's just fantastic. It was after I was gone from the show, and him experiencing that show without me
really rubbed me the wrong way. Maybe she's referencing the letter that Brad Kern apparently sent her after she was off the show. We won't know until if/when she reads it. But if not, and she's just saying that on her own, it's like, wow, ego much? Not the show after I left, not wishing I'd stayed. No, experiencing that show without me. Like, wow, Shannon, do your arms ever get tired from patting yourself on the back that much?
3 women on a show, supposed to, in its own way be an ensemble, but I was cast, first. The show was originally sold to the WB based on me, so obviously that's going to be there. I kind of felt that I didn't kind of feel it was happening, of the competitiveness was kicking in.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying with you, I'm saying with Alyssa and myself.
Yeah, and I'm sure you had nothing to do with that, right, Shannon? You can't seem to go 10 minutes talking about Charmed without mentioning that you were cast first or the show was sold based on you, according to you anyway, even though it was Constance's creation and Aaron Spelling was already attached to the project, and arguably he had a much better reputation than you at that time. But no, I'm sure it was all you. And now that you've got, 20 years of reflection under your belt, it's like, if you say stuff like this now, then what did you say back in the day? Like, when you were actually on the show? Like, I'm not saying Alyssa was perfect. I'm just saying that it's got to be hard not to feel competitive when you have to listen to stuff like this. But I do actually agree with her here.
There was a competitiveness with Alyssa. I heard that she addressed it in her book. Obviously, I'm never reading her book because it's sorry, not sorry. So right there, it tells me like, well, you're not friggin' sorry. Like, why even mention something in that case?
Mm-hmm.
In my opinion, that is totally fair. I do not know who suggested that title for the book, but it was a terrible idea for a memoir. Like, I know the sorry not sorry phrase was super popular at the time, similar to the way that Thank You Next became a thing after Ariana Grande released a song. Well, that aged like milk, didn't it? But Really, it's just such a pretentious term and pretty much a way of admitting fault and being like, yeah, I might have done something, but I'm not sorry. And it's just like, apologize or don't, but don't be like, sorry, not sorry. It's just, it's tasteless. But, maybe I should read it because, I am reading Shannon's book. To be fair, maybe I should read Alyssa's. What do you guys think? Would you guys like to see book reviews on these? And moving on to the next point of contention, Shannon claims that Alyssa and her mother blocked Shannon from being able to see Holly in the hospital after Holly had her surgery, and the way they kind of tried to pull Holly away from Shannon caused a rift in their friendship. And I have a lot of questions about that. Like, on one hand, I feel like the fact that Alyssa's mother came out talking about it kind of works in Shannon's favor, because it's just like, let your daughter speak for herself. Why are you inserting yourself into issues with her former coworker? Like, on one hand, I'm like that. And then on the other hand, I'm like, well, Shannon did mention her mother too. So, technically that invites her in to defend herself. And also, she does make a fair point about how would they even have blocked her from seeing Holly? Like, that's a question I had too. And I feel like Shannon should give an answer on that. I mean, they're not technically family. They're clearly not married or anything. So legally and in the hospital policy, they should have had no stance on how to block her. I feel like there's something else there that's not being said, or Shannon is kind of twisting something to make it sound worse than it was. But I just don't understand why, if Holly and Shannon were such good friends, how Alyssa managed to create such a big rift between them, according to Shannon, because Holly didn't have much to say here. But a part of me wonders if, because Shannon said she cried every night of season 2, and part of it was due to the divide with Holly. She felt like Alyssa was driving a wedge between them. Now, I would be very curious to see what Alyssa had to say about season 2. Like, if it turned out that that was actually the more bearable season for her to deal with when Shannon was still on the show, then, this is just speculation, but it does suggest that maybe when Holly was away from Shannon, Alyssa actually had an easier time on set, because someone else pointed out in a different video that Holly seems to have no ill will for Alyssa herself. Like, she talks rather positively about her when she's in conventions and stuff, and she herself has said she's still in contact with Alyssa and everything, that it's one big dysfunctional family. But when she's around Shannon, it seems to be an Alyssa bashing party, and it just makes me wonder if Shannon wasn't a bit of a bully, and one of the reasons she had such a miserable time on season 2 was because her partner in crime, if you will, wasn't really on her side at that point, and that really, she didn't handle it well. Again, just speculation, but it does make me wonder. But that is pretty much it for part 1 of the podcast. So moving into part 2,
the narrative that I quit was assigned to me by other people. It wasn't assigned to me. I didn't assign it to myself.
Pardon my French, but bullshit. See, this is one of the statements that made me want to do this video in the first place, because, Shannon says
the narrative that I quit was assigned to me by other people. It wasn't assigned to me. I didn't assign it to myself.
But does anyone else remember this?
Hi, I was just wondering if you were surprised when you were the sister to be killed off in Charmed.
I wasn't, because it was something I'd been asking for. So, no, that's always like a very careful negotiation between myself and the studio. And it was pretty much from the beginning of the 3rd season that I was saying, I think it's time, and it's time for me personally, and I thought it was time for the show, because a show like that needs to stay fresh, and we can't constantly have us escaping demons and bad things. And I, especially back then, because I was much younger, I had a tendency to get very bored. And as an actor, I always liked playing different characters. So playing the same character all the time was extremely, extremely difficult for me. So no, it was, they weren't exactly thrilled when I was like, I gotta go.
Yeah. Shannon claims that this narrative was assigned to her, but it's like, you not only went with it for the sake of saving your career because your team told you that your career wouldn't survive another firing, her words, not mine, but you elaborated on it. You gave details that you didn't have to do. You made it sound like you were oh so overcharmed, and no one made you say those things. You chose to say them. I mean, you could have brushed it off or made some non-committal statement like, oh, a lot of stuff was happening behind the scenes and I just couldn't stay on the show anymore, or, you know, it was just time for me to go. But no, you did this. And so that makes your statement about how you didn't assign it to yourself look, it's not a good look. Let's just say that. And see, that's what frustrates me about this podcast, because as I saw it put in a comment on a different video, everything is everyone else's fault. And it's like, they're not wrong. At no point do Shannon and Holly bring up anything that they did that was, quote, wrong, or where they might have been at fault. Nope, it's everyone else, and that's ridiculous.
I was the world's nicest guy, and they ruined my life for no reason.
You would think that two grown women would be able to take some accountability, especially when they're making a podcast all about laying the truth out for everyone to see. And this isn't even the worst statement she made, but trust me, we'll get to that. But ultimately, it is a choice she made. She could have chose to go through with suing them for her pay-or-play contract, which, you know what, that actually would have been interesting. I kind of wish that had happened, because I'm sure Alyssa would have been called as a witness, and it'd be interesting to see what people say under oath. But, that's not what happened, and the fact that she's trying to make it sound like, people pretty much made her do this, and she was forced to lie. It's like, you weren't, though.
And really my only consolation, and it wasn't a very big one, was that I said to Jonathan, you guys will not have the privilege of saying that you fired her again. And I said, the only thing that I'm going to ask of you is that she gets to put out whatever statement she wants to. And I said, if anybody talks about it, then I'm going to be a very big problem.
And then also,
but now at my age and dealing with stage 4 cancer, I just don't feel like I have to keep telling a lie. I feel like it's okay to be honest.
Translation: this lie does not benefit me anymore, so it's okay to tell the truth now. Which I think is utter BS. And every video, every article I've seen, you handle this with kid gloves. They make it sound like it's okay that she lied. Like it's understandable that, you know, she was forced to. They're taking everything at face value, and it's just like, dude, listen to what she's actually saying. Look at her, what she's saying now compared to what she said before.
Now for the first time, Shannon speaks openly about walking out in this Entertainment Tonight cover story.
There was too much drama on the set and not enough passion for the work. You know, I'm 30 years old and I don't have time for drama in my life anymore.
They weren't exactly thrilled when I was like, I gotta go.
You know, like, if she was lying this whole time, what's to say that this is now the truth? Maybe it's the new lie. You know, like, how are we supposed to know? And that's what happens when you lie. You can't be trusted if and when you finally tell the truth. And the only reason I believe anything that's being said right now is because Holly is corroborating it. And she is one of the only people whose statements actually match what she's saying now. They just make more sense with context. And now, you know, like, with context around it, it puts the pieces into place and makes it make sense. But that's only because Holly seems to have consistently been honest. And yeah, it's just like Shannon, however, over here, you know, I wish more people would be holding her accountable. Like, she's not a child. It is okay to say, hey, that's not what you were saying before. And, you know, you can't just expect people to look the other way. Like I said, that isn't even the worst statement. We're getting to that. Trust me. But moving on to something that I actually thought was kind of cute, Holly's stuff cover. By the way, fun little story. I first saw this cover when it came out and I was a kid. One of my mom's friends had it and I saw it and I'm like, oh my god, can I please read that? That's Piper. And my mom's like, no, you can't read that. Look, it's a naughty magazine. I'm like, no, it's not. And even if it is, I don't care, please. So I ended up getting to read it, and my mom's friends saw that I loved it so much that they ended up giving it to me, but my mom really wasn't happy. And it's just like, hey, your boyfriend has nudie magazines everywhere and piles so big we can sit on. So, you know what, just let me have this, okay? So yeah, just a fun little part of that story is just that I loved Piper so much, I didn't even care that she was technically topless. Although I do see what they mean about making her look different. Like Holly mentions that they heavily airbrushed her and changed the way she looked, and it's very clear that kind of stings a little bit because, you know, it just hurts. It's like you're saying that I'm not good enough the way I am. And I don't even know why they did that to begin with. It's like you realize we watch her every week. We know what she looks like. Like, I know they're trying to sell magazines, but you don't have to make her look borderline unrecognizable either. Although I guess she was recognizable because my little kid self was like, that's Piper. So not completely unrecognizable, but you know what I mean, what airbrushing does to the face and, you know, everything. It's just like, why? But anyway, I just thought I would share my own personal experience with that cover. Although something I did not like in this conversation is that I think I said earlier that Shannon can't seem to praise someone without also praising herself, and in some cases she does backhanded compliments. Like, I'm definitely familiar with that friend I mentioned earlier. That was one of the ways I was like, maybe she's not as much of a friend after all, because I remember I posted something on my art account after a while of not posting, and she said, oh, this is so good, I almost didn't recognize it as your artwork. And it's just like, was that supposed to be a compliment? And I kind of get that vibe from some of the stuff Shannon says, not because of my personal experience, but just because, you know, like, if I were a friend in that position, it's just like, can you not? And it happens here too. Like, okay, we're talking about Holly's shoot, and it's clearly something she's proud of, you know, it's the one cover she ever did like that. And so what does Shannon do? She starts talking about all the covers she's done, and that she was essentially more wanted because she was the one the network greenlit the project for, blah 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 blah. It's like, really? You couldn't just let Holly have that one? I can kind of understand why someone's self-worth might take a hit around Shannon, and the way she acts like the competition on the show it's like she had nothing to do with it. It was all from other people coming at her. They were just essentially kind of jealous. It's like, yeah, I'm sure it has nothing to do with you saying things like this. So something I saw another commenter say is that Alyssa apparently had a problem with Shannon demanding to be in the center of the photos. And I'm like, I've never heard anything about that before. Let me look into it and see if there's any truth to it. Well, you know, obviously it's not necessarily truth because you can't prove anyone said that. So I thought I would let the photos speak for themselves. So I went to the galleries for each of the photo shoots from each season, and I noticed something interesting. So I focused on the photos where it's a photo of the three sisters, not a photo of four people, not one that was clearly superimposed together from individual photos, or, you know, like copies that are clearly just reusing as photos. I focused on those, and of those, in season 1 and season 2, because there wasn't a group photo shoot for season 3, I kind of wonder if that's because they couldn't get along long enough to have a photo shoot. But again, just speculation. But between season 1 and season 2, there were 20 photos. Of those 20 photos, Shannon is in the center of 18. Holly is in the center of 1, and then there's one that's kind of ambiguous where Shannon is off to the side but still kind of in the middle, so I just kind of left that one alone. But that's too much to be an accident. Now, at first I thought that was maybe a network thing, because it definitely sounds like a network to be like, oh, we want our star in the middle. That's what they do, right? But after Shannon left, and season 4 going forward, the biggest star on the show would likely be Alyssa, right? So you would think that she would have taken Shannon's place in the middle of the photos. Well, not exactly. There were 18 group photos in the gallery of season 4. Of those, Rose is in the center of 5, Holly is in the center of 5, and Alyssa is in the center of 8. So while Alyssa does have more of a presence in the center, it's still much more balanced than any of the previous seasons. And then that continues on for the next few seasons. In season 5, there were 8 photos. Holly was in the center of 4, Alyssa was in the center of 2, and Rose was in the center of 2. For season 6, there were 9 photos. Holly was in the center of 4, Alyssa wasn't even in the center of any, and then Rose was in the center of 5. Season 7 did not have any group photos. I don't know why that is, but moving on to season 8, of the trio photos, there was 2 with Rose in the center, 1 with Holly in the center, and 1 with Alyssa in the center. So the final tally ends up being Shannon was in the center of 18 photos between 2 seasons. Alyssa was in the center of 11 over the course of 8 seasons. Holly was in the center of 15 over 8 seasons, and Rose was in the center of 14 over 5. So the one who was in the least amount of seasons still managed to be in the center of the majority of the photos. That's definitely not an accident, and since Alyssa didn't just take over, it was much more balanced in the later seasons. I kind of wonder if that was a Shannon thing, and it definitely seems, just from the photos, just letting the photos speak for themselves, that Alyssa's problem wasn't that she wanted to be in the center, she just didn't like that Shannon demanded to be. But take from that what you will. I thought that was interesting to bring up, and it definitely supports the idea that Shannon fed into the competition and the tension behind the scenes. But again, nothing actually proving that, but it also doesn't disprove it. So there's that. And then they do mention how they keep all their texts and stuff, and now see, that's something I actually 100% agree with, because there are way too many people in the world who will say or do something and pretend like they didn't because they think you can't prove different, and then they have a Pikachu face when, surprise, you can. I mean, of course, some people will still lie even afterwards, but it's still a good idea to keep a record. One they can't access, by the way. I mean, maybe I listened to a few more Reddit stories than I should, but still not a bad idea.
It was funny. I don't know why they put me in a room with Jonathan Levin, of all people. It wasn't Jim. It wasn't Aaron. Well, Aaron had was having his own health problems at that point. But it wasn't Jim, and it wasn't Duke, who were by my bedside when I woke up from surgery.
Wow. Seriously? Good effing grief. Talk about a soulless corporation. I mean, imagine you wake up from surgery and then there's one of your bosses waiting to talk shop with you. How was that even allowed? I thought there were policies against that sort of stuff. You're not that coherent when you wake up from surgery. You're on drugs and working through the anesthesia. I know, I've had surgery, and to imagine that there's some higher up sitting there waiting to pounce on me the moment I wake up, I feel so effing sorry for Holly, and honestly, she deserves mad respect points for sticking up for herself in that situation when she was so vulnerable, and because no way was that easy, so congratulations on her, but serious disgust towards the people who thought that would be okay and who allowed that to happen. Imagine you wake up from surgery and no, it's not your friends waiting there for you. No, it's not your family waiting for you. It's work waiting there to strong arm you into agreeing and staying on the show. That makes me a lot angrier than it probably should, but I think I need to move on. I can feel my heart starting to run faster, but if anyone ever had a cause to sue the show, I think that would have been a fantastic reason. And then we finally get a complete picture of what happened behind the scenes.
And he had tears in his eyes already because he could see I was getting upset, as you can hear me getting upset. And I said, why would you hire her again, just to fire her? And he said, we didn't mean to. And he said, but we've been backed into this corner. He said, we're basically in a position where it's one or the other. We were told that it's her or me, and Alyssa has threatened to sue us for a hostile workplace environment, which, because she went to the therapist or the mediator or the corporate mediator, whatever the heck his title is, she built a case for herself where she was documenting every time she felt uncomfortable on set and for whatever reason, whereas you and I refused to speak to him. So that's where the deck was stacked. And what's funny is that by today's standard, it wouldn't even qualify because there were no on-set, brawls. There was no either even like harsh words exchanged. It was all behind the scenes. It was all in the trailer. It was nothing that anybody or any of our guest stars ever noticed or noted. Like it's just doesn't make any sense anymore. There are people that actually behave badly and get away with it. And there are men that, you know, abuse people, throw things, screaming fits, and get away with it. Like, I don't think people understand that that never happened here. Unless you were there, no one understands that.
And I would say that this is clearly just one side of the story, but honestly, with everything we've heard about Shannon's departure over the year, this actually makes a lot of sense. But I'm conflicted on how to feel about it, honestly, because, you know, on one hand, it makes Alyssa sound like a very conniving, underhanded person, and clearly since Rose had her own issues with Alyssa after Shannon wasn't even on the show anymore, and there were other things that we'll touch on towards the end, it's clear that Alyssa is not an angel, but from what I've seen of Holly and Shannon, it definitely feels like they were this, you know, like they had each other and Alyssa had Alyssa. So, you know, I kind of understand why Alyssa would rather talk to a mediator than them. Like, if it was true that they were kind of a tag team against her, you know, like, who are you going to talk to? Them or the mediator? I would personally talk to the mediator. And, you know, for all we know, Alyssa did try to talk to Shannon and Holly about things, and they just took the same line that they're doing here. The problem isn't us, it's everyone else. Like, it's impossible to talk to people like that. It goes nowhere. So if that was the scenario, it would make more sense to document, you know, when you felt uncomfortable and take that to the mediator. Now, the ultimatum, I think, was a bit much. Like, either she goes or I do. And she threatened to sue them for creating a hostile work environment, which I don't think is entirely on Shannon. I mean, if Alyssa really did have a good case for a hostile work environment, then I think that goes way beyond one person. And I think that's what the network was really worried over. It's just like, shoot, she's got so much dirt on us. We are screwed if she actually follows through on that. So I kind of, you know, get the impression that while I do think that Shannon contributed to the competitiveness and that she and Holly were probably not always the nicest to Alyssa, I do feel that Shannon ended up being a scapegoat a little bit. Though, let's be real, some of this she brought on herself, like how she talks about the pay discrepancy.
And then the whole, you know, pay discrepancy, even though it was so incredibly minor, not even worth a conversation, really, but once that all came out and her and I had the conversation and my attorneys went to Spelling and said, this is not okay. You can't be doing, you know, side deals with someone.
It was me that told you that there was another deal. So why wasn't I fired?
Right.
Yeah, says the person on the beneficial side of that discrepancy. I wonder if she would have felt the same if it was the other way around and Alyssa was the one making more money than her. Bet you she'd whistle a different tune. But moving on to more of the crap that Holly had to deal with.
The conversation got to the point where he said, not just threatened to sue me, but said he would sue me and dock my wages if I worked anywhere else.
Right. I remember including being a bagger at a grocery store, they would still dock your wages.
Yeah, I said, well, that's because I started laughing, like through my tears, I started laughing. And I was like, what does that even mean? He said, we will sue you for what we think we will have lost on the show because of your departure. And we will dock your wages to regain those numbers. And I said, well, what if I go to like Arizona and I bag groceries? He goes, we will dock your wages. It really was like, suddenly I'm married to the mob. They forced me to go back to a show that I wanted nothing to do with.
Wow. So Holly was literally threatened to going back to the show. Like, jeez, poor Holly. You can hear how angry and emotional she is. And honestly, I'm glad Shannon brought her on for the podcast because you can tell how long she's been keeping this all in. And it's nice that she finally gets to let it out. And, you know, it's Shannon and Holly doing this. It's not a network behind the scenes. It's not something anyone else can control but them. So no one can tell them, oh, you can't say that. It's like, yeah, I effing can. So good for them. But seriously, I thought that surgery thing was bad, but for real.
How low can you go?
It felt like blackmail.
Yeah, it wasn't like blackmail. It was blackmail. And let's be real. Even, let's say for the sake of argument, Shannon did deserve to be fired. I have my reservations on that still, but I can definitely think of a few people who deserved it as much, if not more. And Brad Kern is at the top of the list. I feel like that show would have been way less toxic had he been flicked off, like, even in season 3 or before. So, yeah, just the girls had their issues for sure. But the guys were also a huge problem, and they never had to deal with the consequences. And that's really crappy that it always seems like the on-screen talent gets most of the scrutiny, whereas the behind-the-scenes showrunners and heads, they get away with murder and no one says a thing. And I'm just over here like, dude, what's wrong with people? Yeah, for real. Like, that's just my reaction to like everything these days. I look at the news, I look at the TV, and I'm just like, what's wrong with people? But moving on.
And you were dating Julian, so you guys were off in that world, and then Brian was off with Alyssa.
And I guess that confirms the cheating rumors. I wonder if Shannon's going to address that she apparently slept with a married man somewhere in this podcast, which, by the way, is super hypocritical considering the fact that she also said this in her podcast.
I have always said from the beginning, if you cheat on me, you're out. That's it. With every boyfriend, every husband, every fiance, you cheat on me, we're done. I will not look back. You will fail to exist. I've been like that hardcore about it.
It's like, so if they cheat on you, it's terrible. But if you cheat with someone else, it's like, moral gray area. No. Anyway, now onto the part of this podcast that just blew me out of the water with how ridiculous it was. And it was like, okay, that's it. So Shannon said,
when they asked me if I would come for the finale,
you said no.
I said no. And I didn't even ask like how they would bring me back, because it's a fantasy world. So obviously there's tons of different ways to do it.
My initial reaction when I first heard this was, wait, what? She did not just say that. What the Shannon, did you not say this?
The answer, and as you all know, I'm an incredibly direct and honest person, so I should be giving a much more political answer, but I'm not going to. The reason for the season finale that I didn't is because, honestly, the way that they sort of wanted to bring Prue back into it was just not authentic, and there was nothing interesting and good, and it wasn't true to the character, so that's why I said no.
You see? You see what I mean? That I mostly believe what Shannon is saying in regards to what happened behind the scenes stuff simply because Holly is corroborating it. But my goodness. Shannon needs to take accountability for being a liar and stop hiding behind this person and that person, because she is responsible for her own lies. And you know what? If people want to make an argument for her saying that she quit over saying that she got fired for the sake of her career, then okay, I can see how that is kind of a rock in a hard place. But saying that you didn't come back for the finale because you didn't like the way it was written, that it wasn't true to the character, and then turning around and saying that you didn't even ask how it was written, sorry, but no, that does not fly here.
Let me tell you something, that shit may fly in Siberia, but it does not fly on Mulholland. You got it?
No way. And see, this is the thing where I was like, even if I hadn't had that coughing fit and it ruined the first attempt at this recording, I still probably would have thrown it out simply for the sake of this, because no way was I just going to ignore the fact that she said this, and I hope no one else does. And the fact that they were even willing to take her suggestions. It's like, oh my God, Shannon. Do you not hear yourself? You sit here and you talk about how much the fans mean to you, and this is why you didn't tell them, you didn't want to ruin the show for them, and blah, 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 blah. But yet, the one real opportunity you had to back this up by appearing in the finale so people could see, Paige meet you and everything, like, one time where you really could have done that. You're like, nope. Won't even consider the idea. And then you have the audacity to turn around and make it sound like you did, but they just didn't do it very well and you decided against it in the end. It's like, you were such a liar. And then I recorded this whole video without knowing that Danielle Harris and Scout Taylor Compton have their own podcast called Talk Scary to Me, where they just kind of, talk about their lives and their experiences on sets and stuff. But they have both been on Charmed. Scout Taylor Compton played Thistle/Fairies in multiple episodes, and Danielle Harris played in the season 1 episode, The Fourth Sister, as Aviva. Well, they both talked about their experience on Charmed, and it was not positive. So once I heard that, it definitely changed my perspective on the dynamic of the behind the scenes stuff, because you know what? Why am I even talking? I'll just let everyone speaking for themselves, and we'll let Holly go first.
And what's funny is that by today's standard, it wouldn't even qualify, because there were no on-set, brawls. There was no even like harsh words exchanged. It was all behind the scenes. It was all in the trailer. It was nothing that anybody or any of our guest stars ever noticed or noted.
And it's like, oh really? Let's see what Scout and Danielle have to say about that.
Anything could happen. Anything could happen. I was like, man, I don't want to be on a set like that.
Hell
where I'm
no.
not comfortable with my job.
Oh God, no.
That would be nerve-wracking.
So I have a couple of uncomfortable stories to tell you. Talking about being uncomfortable at work. So I did. It reminds me. I did an episode of Charmed.
Oh, I did Charmed.
You did?
Yeah.
How was yours?
I think we went over that. I think I did only did like 7 or 8 episodes. It was interesting.
You only did 7 or 8 episodes?
Yeah.
I did 1. That's a lot.
Okay. Well, I was the fairy, Danielle. Every time they needed a fairy, I was Thistle, the fairy, the witch fairy. Were
you on when Rose McGowan or when
I wasn't
Shannon?
on. I wasn't on.
You're on Shannon's?
Yeah.
Okay. Tell me how your experience was on set.
The girls were always fighting.
Okay.
They were always fighting. I was also a kid.
Okay.
I was a child.
How old were you?
I think when I first did it, I was like 9.
Oh shit.
Oh yeah, and then stopped
okay.
I was a baby.
You're a little kid,
but I knew that these women were always fighting.
They fighting in the makeup trailer?
Yes.
Yeah.
In the makeup trailer.
Yeah.
Sometimes I wasn't allowed in there because someone was in there, and I was always fighting.
Oh my God.
Always fighting.
It's crazy bitches.
Yeah. Crazy, but it's such a good show.
It is a good show. It is a good show.
Watch those episodes, but tell me what happened.
I think I did the 3rd or 4th episode of the first season.
Okay.
And never again. I was doing a movie at the same time where I was working nights.
Okay.
So I would go to work days on Charmed and go directly to set and work nights.
Oh damn! I think you did mention, Oh, okay, cute.
So it was just all back,
Yeah.
But the first assistant camera guy was super cute. Was chatting with me. He was the DP son.
Okay.
And everybody had lunch. I had a nice trailer, and then they had like a little like table outside of the trailer where I ate.
Yeah.
You didn't eat like with crew. It was like everybody had their own little thing,
Yeah.
So I was eating out, and then he came up and wanted to sit, and hey, do you mind if I join you? And I was like, sure. Anyway, we started chatting, and Shannon kept walking by, and like she was not very nice to me anyway. And then but she kept walking by, like I kept getting mad dogged. I was like, what is going? I don't understand what's going on. Anyway, never really said anything about it. It was not a very fun experience for me on set, that's for sure.
Okay.
But because there was a lot of fighting between the girls, and like I didn't know who to talk to, who to pick.
Yeah.
It's like if I pick Shannon, then Holly's going to be mean, and then if I pick Holly, Shannon's going to be mean.
It's so funny how you like knew that
right away.
Right
of course.
away, yeah.
And Alyssa, and I was like, I can't deal with this right now. Anyway, long story short, what I didn't realize is that the AC was sort of using me to get back at Shannon. He had been her boyfriend.
Oh.
For like 17 months or something, like crazy, like over a year and a half.
Whoa.
And every single time, so no wonder they were awful to me.
Yeah.
Because I was having lunch with him, and Shannon that's why I was getting stink eye.
Yeah, but like you don't know that.
I had no idea.
You need to like
say
read
something.
the situation or say something.
Yeah, I had no freaking clue. What I mean, like I'm gonna come
He's
and
a
try
cute
to
guy,
and
he was
was
giving
talking
you
to
attention,
me,
and you were like, sure,
yeah.
okay. And all these girls don't like me, so.
What else was I gonna do?
Dude, could you kind of tell, like even by watching that show, that the women were not so nice?
I remember leaving that show saying, if they offered me $100,000 an episode to be a series regular, I don't know if I would do it.
Yeah.
because I just felt sick every day.
Yeah.
I don't want to be in that environment.
Yeah.
You know, I think it got bad. I heard it got better when Rose came on the show, but I don't know her either. So I don't know what the situation was, but who wants to be a part of that? I just can't. I can't live my life like that.
Yeah, even the crew. I mean,
Wow, would you look at that? Isn't that interesting? Not only, according to them, and they have absolutely no reason to lie, they have nothing to gain out of this. They were just talking about their experiences and ended up landing here. But according to them, you guys were not only fighting all the time, even way back in season 1, but Little Miss I Wasn't the Problem is mentioned by name as being a problem, going out of her way to be mean to a guest star for something that wasn't even her fault. She didn't know that was your ex-boyfriend, and he was using her anyway. So why are you being mean to your guest star? Like, that is so unprofessional. And the fact that Shannon sits here with a straight face acting like she never did anything to anyone is just so rich. Now, do I think Shannon was the only problem? No, because Armin Shimmerman, who guest starred towards the end of season 4, so almost a full season after Shannon had left, had this to say about his experience on the show.
Oh, excuse me. And what I will put on camera, the worst diva moments I ever had, without a doubt. Two shows. They're neither Buffy nor Star Trek. I hated the ladies on Bewitched. Charmed. And there's a reason why they were cast as witches. Of all the shows I ever worked, that was by far the ugliest.
So it's just like, no matter what season you're looking at, clearly people could not get along. But the way Shannon and Holly has always been my favorite because I always thought she was the most humble and real, but this is kind of tanking my impression of her a little bit. You know, they sit over here and act like, nah, we didn't do anything. People are just making stuff up. It's like, you know, at this point, there's a whole host of people that either have to be making something out of nothing and or be wrong for you to be right. It's like, again, take responsibility for your own actions. It's not easy by any means, but it's definitely better than what you're doing now, trying to make it sound like everyone else was the problem and you weren't. So yeah, if I had known about that before recording the bulk of the video, I would have been a lot more critical of things that happened behind the scenes. So yeah, those were pretty much my thoughts on the podcast. If she does another one talking about Charmed in the future, I'll probably cover that one too if you guys want me to. But this one was something special. There were, like I said in the beginning, there were things I was like, oh no, they didn't. And then there were things where I was like, she did not just say that. And I hope that makes more sense now. And at the end of the day, I still think that everyone was at fault here. Like Holly said, there were no angels, there were no demons. Everyone had bad days. But I do think that Shannon and Holly were probably much more responsible for the more petty behind the scenes drama than they realize, because, you know, from what they've said.
And what's funny is that by today's standard, it wouldn't even qualify because there were no on-set, you know, brawls. There was no even like harsh words exchanged. It was all behind the scenes. It was all in the trailer. It was nothing that anybody or any of our guest stars ever noticed or noted. So by today's standards, it wouldn't fucking fly.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I lived a year after that, sort of replaying everything in my brain and really like trying to find those moments where and I couldn't find them. Like there was no, like, we never had it out. Like we never.
Not privately or publicly.
Right. I don't ever remember being mean to her on set.
They seem to believe that because they weren't outright mean, that the issue wasn't from their side at all. But there is a reason that Mean Girls is such a classic that they're currently trying to ruin with that ridiculous remake they're doing, but that's a rant for another day. But it is a great example of how some girls, i.e. Mean Girls, go about their agenda. They care about their image. They want people to believe they're nice. So of course they're not going to walk up to your face and be rude. They know better. Now, being nice to your face while bad-mouthing you to others and sabotaging you behind your back, making you feel uncomfortable, reminding you that they were there first. Maybe that they're the one the network chose and you're just the replacement. After how many times she has mentioned in this podcast alone that she was the one the network greenlit the project for and all this stuff, I could definitely see her saying something like that. And I would hope that, being in their 50s now, Shannon and Holly would maybe have taken some responsibility for that. Never once did they say, yes, I messed up, or no, I was the one who did that, or made that mistake. Nothing was ever their fault. Not Shannon's being fired from 90210, not the conflict with Alyssa, nothing. But it is very clear that they are unnecessarily petty sometimes. Like, something I didn't include in the previous video on why Shannon left was Alyssa's interview on Watch What Happens Live, because it didn't really... I couldn't really fit it in anywhere. Like, it always looked so out of place, so I just nixed it and left it out. But here it does make sense to include, because I think it kind of shows the way Shannon and Holly would operate. So when Alyssa was on Watch What Happens Live, she was asked about why Shannon left, and one of the things she said was that the set kind of felt like high school. And so on a different interview, when Shannon and Holly were doing their traveling show, they were being interviewed about the show, but the interviewer decided to bring what Alyssa set up, and for the most part, their response was diplomatic, but Holly's little jab about Alyssa not going to high school and then Shannon's laughing at it,
saying like, sometimes you don't always get along with the person 24/7 that you work with.
Right. She didn't go to high school. What are we talking about here?
Could you imagine being on set and watch that going on? It's like, watching this clip is what made the Mean Girls connection for me, because it's just like, that would hurt my feelings, although I'm sure they don't think they're being mean. So if that's what they were like on the set of Charmed, or, probably were, since they weren't getting along, I can see why that would have made someone uncomfortable. And they don't seem to see that. Now, on the flip side of that, I wouldn't exactly trust anything Alyssa says either, because... Shannon didn't address the cordial comment from Alyssa.
I would say we are cordial.
But judging by what she said about, her book and everything, it doesn't sound like they're on as good of terms as Alyssa claims, which, by the way, called it. But Alyssa also said on that same Watch What Happens Live thing, we never really found out what happened, she told the fan who asked the question. Yeah, I don't believe at all that she never really found out what happened. You don't have to get into it and spill all the beans or spill the tea. But, don't lie. Especially since if what Shannon and Holly say is true about Alyssa going to the network and issuing the ultimatum, which I do fully believe happened, then not only did she know what happened, but she actually set it in motion. So saying that she never really found out what happened is such a lie. I fell into Goro World, by the way. I can't get out. It's just weirdly fascinating to me. But, yeah. It's the same thing I said about Shannon. If you don't want to talk about it, then find a way to skirt the issue or just give as little info as possible. But when you add details or you flat out lie, then, while the audience may not know the truth, you do. And you know what you're doing is wrong. And it would be nice if everyone involved in the situation could act like the adults they are. And by the way, they were also adults at the time. Young adults, yes, but adults all the same, and definitely old enough to know better.
You get to choose your life. You get to choose how you want to be in your life. So choose wisely. Thank you.
Okay, that is pretty much it. Thank you so much for watching. I know it was really, really long, and I know I waffled on a lot, but I hope you can see where I'm coming from. It's just really frustrating that even after all this time, we're still getting the runaround in some ways, and it's just... Whatever, though. I've said my piece on it. If Shannon does another video on Charmed, I can come back to it if you guys want, or if she ever reads that letter from Brad Kern. Yeah, we could always do that in the future, but for now, I think I'm just gonna let the drama rest. Next week, I think I have a video planned, but after that, it might be a little sparse until February, because guess what, guys? As of February, I will have officially been on YouTube for a year. My uploads have been sparse, but it will be a year since I started YouTube. So it's just like, I have some fun ideas, and I really want to make sure that I don't get messed around again like I did around Halloween, and then my plans around Christmas. And it's just like, this time I want to make sure that things go off without a hitch. So I'm going to spend the bulk of January preparing for that, and I've got a lot of I've just got a lot of ideas, but I'll that's coming. Stay tuned, but for now, thank you so much for watching. I hope you liked it. Please let me know what you thought in the comments, and I hope you have a wonderful day. I hope you're having a wonderful new year, and bye.